Hello and welcome to, well, another video about support of Western Front and another video about the Lord Clives. Because, as said, I managed to do 4 of them last time in a little over 40 minutes. So if I'd done all 8 in one slide, one sort of run, it should have probably taken about 80 minutes. And that wouldn't have given me the time to do the things I want to do. Because it would have made it all very long. And the whole point of Long Patrol is it's supposed to be a series of roughly 40-minute videos. I did originally try with the idea of 20-minute videos, but honestly, I can't really think that quickly. I can just about do 4 random books if I really work hard in 15 minutes. But I really have to work hard for that one. All right then, so it's now M10-13 or M9-13. I'm trying to remember, because by my account there are the 4 Abercrombie class. 4 of those. They're M1-4. And then Lord Clive should start with M5 and go on. But apparently Lord Clive is M6, so there is an M5 going around somewhere that I'm going to have to track down. Obviously I've missed someone. I will find them, wherever they may be. For I am the Lord of the History, said he. Not Lord of the Dance, Lord of History. So my mouse is wrong. But I do know the last one is M13, because I always thought, well, that's a strange thing to do with a ship, to call it M13. That just seems like asking for trouble. Anyway, so the first person we're going to talk about is Admiral Reginald Bacon. He is the person who takes over after Horace Hood goes off to command 3rd Battlecruiser Squadron. And he's technically off the retired list. He has specialized in various areas of his career, ship design, electricity, submarines and mining. Reached lieutenant on the 20th of August 1883 and put in command of TB-33 in July 1887. And July 1883, he was appointed to command TB-81. This is quite normal because these ships would be activated for maneuvers other than an annual exercise. And they would have officers who were appropriate, young, aggressive officers, put in charge of them for the exercise. And then their crews would be afterwards go back to being reservists somewhere. The ships would be stored, and it was fine. Promoted to commander in 1895 and captain in 1900. Today has been a fun day for spellings, hasn't it? I've had fire instead of file and commanded instead of commander. In 1901, he was appointed to Admiral's President, the R&R Hub in London, for special service with the Admiralty to do with submarines. And there are various things which sort of discuss what he does in this role. It's worthwhile noting that some people do, and I do put this politely, do say that he consider him the first Inspector General of, well, Captain Inspector of submarines. And I can agree with that one to an extent. And there's a reason I say to an extent. Because he's sort of the first in role, and is technically inspecting captain of HS submarines, and then he's technically put in charge of various other things to do with them. You know, he fills a lot of roles. It's when the submarine service is being formed, and it's like in 1901, he's appointed to president, but then he's also appointed to technically be in charge of HMS Hazard, which is Royal Navy's first submarine depot ship. So technically, he's acting as the squadron commander, because he's technically the captain of submarines, and he's appointed to the post of inspecting captain of submarines and all these things under the Third Sea Lord. But he also then goes and works with various out in the Mediterranean, various people out there. So it's one of those sort of nebulous postings, okay? It's a nebulous role in that he's wearing many, many hats. In 1904, he goes to a more sort of regular hat in that he becomes a naval assistant to Sir John Fisher. Jackie Fisher gets a very bright person as assistant, and Fisher declares him to be acknowledged to be the cleverest officer in the Navy. Such praise from Fisher doesn't hurt Bacon's career. In fact, it accelerates it because the rest of the Admiralty agrees with him. And so in 1905, in December, he is appointed to command the formidable class battleship HMS Irresistible. And there is a reason for this. He needs battleship experience. Why does he need battleship experience? Because he's been handpicked to become the first captain of HMS Dreadnought in July 1906, but he hasn't commanded a battleship. He hasn't served enough time on a battleship prior to then. So they quickly parachute him into command of HMS Irresistible. And he is literally in command of like 6 months before he becomes captain of HMS Dreadnought. But he's now a serving battleship captain, so it's not as absurd for him to end up in charge. After this, he succeeds Jellicoe as Director of Naval Ordnance and Torpedoes. In 1909, he's promoted to Rear Admiral and retires to become Managing Director of the Coventry Ordnance Works. This is not as strange as it might seem. A, it's a very good post. B, it's a very financially stable post, and he has a young family at this point. He'll lose both sons during World War I, one serving as a soldier in the trenches, the other one as a naval cadet in 1919. Not sure what happens to his daughter. I think she does survive and lives on, but he doesn't have the greatest life when it comes to family. He has a good wife, an understanding wife, but he has a hard life. He's not exactly an easy character to get on with. He's a bit divisive. He tends to be quite blunt. So he's not possibly the most politically able. And he does make an enemy of Turret. And there's a reason he makes an enemy of Turret, in that they both command forces. They have Harwich Force, they have the Dover Patrol in close proximity to each other. And as Bacon is technically a Vice Admiral, and even though he's on the retired list, he's a Vice Admiral, they get into disputes, let's say. And, well, we'll get into that. Anyway, in 1914, he first comes back to the armed forces as a colonel and deputy commandant of the Royal Marines Artillery, because he has a brand new howitzer which the army won't buy, but Churchill thinks is absolutely brilliant. So he comes back to show its use, and he's just about to take it out to the Dardanelles to get involved in Gallipoli, when they decide to promote Horace Hood. And then they go, right, we need an officer to take charge. Let's go for Bacon. And they do. And this is what is written about him post-war. The Chief of the Admiralty War Staff at the time, later Deputy Chief of Naval Staff and Second Sea Lord at one point, Sir Henry F. Oliver, later recalled, Bacon was the most energetic and tireless. He slept in his office, and when anything happened at night in his command and I telephoned, the secretary would tell me he had gone afloat. He had the most exacting and arduous command of any flag officer in the war. and was very badly treated in it. Keyes intrigued against him, and when Lord Westermis became First Sea Lord, pushed him out and supplanted him. So he had fun with Keyes and with Trit. And how does he react? He goes off and starts writing history books. Including this most exceptional account I have next to me, which I have to admit, I've held open with a book because every time I put a lever, a lever thing in here, it has started to sort of react with it. So I thought, well, I'll use a very soft book, hold it open, and that's what I've been doing. And we'll be getting to this because I'll be reading from that when we're going over what the Dover Patrol's been up to and what they get up to during the war while they're under his command. And they are under his command for a lion chunk of World War I. So first of all, let's look at some of the ships he's command. And there is Prince Eugene. Now, here's the thing. I've talked about Prince Eugene a lot. This is the only picture I can find of her which is mildly decent. So she's the stern, second from the left. But it is a nice picture of them all, and it is technically IWM, but I've found in the corner, but I have found it all over Wikipedia and all over places, so I hope they don't mind me using it, because I couldn't otherwise find a picture of Prince Eugene. And Prince Eugene is the only ship named after Prince Eugene of Savoy. And she's built at Harland Wolff's Govan shipyard, launched on the 4th of July and commissioned on the 2nd of September 1915, after being laid down in February 1915. She was modified to accept the 18-inch gun later in her life, but mounts and gun were slow to deliver, so she actually decommissioned before they arrived. The crew is, again, 194, and that's 12 officers and 182 ratings. So they are, they're fairly cost-effective ships. And now let's talk about Ostend and the Dover Patrol in the area it skirts. You have the Straits of Dover, which has a sort of barrier across it. And if you look there, you can see Ostend, you can see Bruges. You can get an idea why that's so important to the Germans. Now, here is the listing for the first Ostend raid. Now, the first Ostend raid takes place in April 1918. And the idea was to basically go up and start doing using artillery, long range, and other weapons, basically every weapon they can, to take out as much of the German shore defences as possible. They're using heavy weapons, and they're blasting with them. There is no air attack. There is nothing different. This is quite a large little, quite a solid little force, and it's put under the command of Rear Admiral Hubert Lyons, but it's Keyes' idea. And they were planning on using block ships to sort of try and block them off so that the Germans couldn't continue to use them. The obsolete cruisers planning to use were Sirius and Brilliant. They were expended in blocking the canal, which emptied at Ostend. It's a nice idea. But in the end, Brilliant got stuck in the mud, and Sirius in the fog managed to smash into it and also get stuck in the mud. So nothing really happened. But this is listed as the first Ostend raid. Now, there is a lot of firing, and there is that. But that's the first Ostend raid. Now let me read something to you from the Dover Patrol. And by the way, I do love I'm going to read the opening cover of this book, for starters. In the following pages, my previous account of the work of Dover Patrol 1915-17 has been brought up to date and condensed into a single volume. Originally, 2-volume piece published. I have been urged to do this for 3 reasons. Firstly, the previous edition had been out of print for several years. Secondly, I was anxious that the price of the present volume should be sufficiently reduced to allow any who served in Dover Patrol to purchase a copy, as a memento of their work without undue strain on their purses. Thirdly, the inaccuracies and omissions of the Admiralty Department account of the work of the Patrol during my command and in the official histories of the war at sea, Volume 5, as well as those of self-contained, worthy but ill-informed critics, need controverting by drawing attention to the true history of that period. It would appear to most people reasonable that before the publication of official accounts of the happenings in any naval theatre of war, proofs of the work should be sent to the Admiral then commanding, so that he might correct inaccuracies and explain any points on which doubt might exist. This has been wisely done by the editor of the official history of the Air Force during the war. In fact, the only excuse for writing an official history at this time is that the most of the officers in command are yet alive, and therefore the valuable information stored in their brains can be placed at the disposal of the historian. I have to say, this isn't the first time I've heard of this sort of thing happening. The Falklands War is a good example. In the two official documents quoted above, this, at all events in my case, has not been done. Therefore, the need for this volume. It would undoubtedly interest many to learn from the heads of the department concerned why so obviously sensible procedure has not been adopted in the above 2 publications. In addition to those who so kindly helped me produce my former book on Dover Patrol, my thanks are due to Mr. Morris Prendergast and Mr. R.H. Gibson for the information which they have so kindly supplied me. And before people start saying, okay, this guy is obviously just going off on a rant for one thing or other, here is the foreword. By Admiral of the Fleet, Earl Jellicoe. Now, Jellicoe is many things, but partisan, political, or biased is you would never say. In fact, he's polite to the end and a servant of the Navy. So the fact he lends his weight to this book. So Reginald Bacon gives in his preface to the book the reasons for its production. He has compressed in the 16th single volume the main features of its earlier work and has incorporated much new matter of interest. Unquestionably, the work of the Dover Patrol during the war was of the very utmost importance to the Allied cause. He goes on for... Let's see, let me just check before I start pronouncing. 4 pages. And that includes the line, one cannot have but regret that the Admiralty have seen fit to issue such an entirely inaccurate communique as to the result of the blocking operations in Ostend, when Admiral Keyes had actually reported that the Vindictive was blocking only a third of the fairway. It's perhaps not natural during the war, and indeed subsequently too, the attention and interest of the general public should be centred mainly on the more striking episodes, usually those in which fighting occurs. To the exclusion of the necessary invaluable heavy collar work, which during the years of war has been formed by officers and men who perhaps have not had the excitement and interest of actual combat with the enemy, however frequent the chances of such combat have been. And I also have a deep feeling for this book because it has an entire chapter named The Tribals. Anyway, that's for another day. It's about the First World War ones. And you will notice that Zubian is one of the destroyers the Royal Navy sends. The fact that there's a load of French destroyers there so they can call it a joint operation is also quite funny. considering how few French destroyers are actually allowed nearby it. Pending information regarding what actual damage had been done, preparations were made to bombard the dockyard at Ostend. They'd already done an attack on Zeebrugge. This dockyard was in the centre of the harbour, with dwelling houses for the civil population within 300 yards on each side. Got a diagram on page 210, but we won't go to that for a moment. I was most anxious to avoid hitting those houses, as they were inhabited by Belgians who had already suffered much in the war. Moreover, wanton or apparently wanton damage would tend to affect our relations with them, and might have produced a rapprochement between them and the enemy. The defences at Ostend, again, were not accurate. We had Hindenburg, east of the harbour, mounted 7-inch guns. Estimated 16 yards. 6-inch batteries were supposed to be in distance. Their exact location was unknown. The arrangements were to bombarding Zeebrugge. The drifters again opening the ships and shooting nets. I determined in this instance also to keep the first underway, not being satisfied as to the defence. It's very fortunate, though, otherwise one or more would have sunk. On 7th start, but again the case to turn to the course was via and the Zuidelijke Pass to the east of the Smaalbach, not by the northern route, which I had previously used, as the enemy might be expected to approach. On the evening of the 6th, another start was made, and early on the 7th, within Ostend. It was a fine morning. Flying mist had spread itself all on the coast. By the time that we arrived, firing, the cathedral was visible, and shortly afterwards, this too appeared. There was nothing to do but anchor and wait. An hour missed everything. So, the alarm signal was made, called, and we stood away, proceeding on the cliff out of our bank. There we watched Outable, firing batteries. We were attacked by aircraft, fortunately dropped attentive, causing tragedies. In spite of times worse of bombing, this was the only reason when it was caused an airplane bomb to away. Early in the afternoon, it was listed, and the shore became clearly visible. Therefore, and then proceeded to ascend. The nets were shot, and the firing commenced. The nets are exploded. Net. Getting the fire on. The ships in north and east forward flag, the General Crawford and Rupert. It was now extraordinarily clear. Every house end standing out with wonderful sharpness. The enemy kite bomb was up eastward of the town. A few minutes after firing commenced, a shell began dropping near the General Crawford. It was exactly 2 minutes. It was at once apparent that heavy batteries had a lot of expected. As I got in 18,000 yards of the shore, I signalled to the monitors to alter course to the north of the stand. I reported to 9,000 yards, which was the maximum I could. Merely the guns of the Hindenburg battery had been given in elevation. Very soon after the signal had been made to the return to Clive, seen that she was a shell fired singly, followed us up, and after we again turned and commenced our fire, the shore battery changed once more. Salvo. The war an hour. There was particularly hot shell starboard close beside the forward bulge. Floating in the water caused a leak. Shells used. The gun was thrown onto the quarterdeck, and several men were wounded. One shot of the same salvo down a head. It led to his being invalided from the Navy, the service of a fire officer being lost to the country. The halyards coiling themselves around the neck of my Chief of Staff, Captain Bowring. Standing with a watch, it was possible to foretell the exact time the salve would arrive, the 3 or 4 shells making an unearthly shriek as they passed close by overhead, or close to the side of the ship. Quite evident that the battery was shooting far too well for the monitors to stand a chance of surviving, if we remained, for at the steep angle at which the shells were falling, a single one striking the ship's deck would have gone nearly vertically down, exploding as it went through, or just before it went through the bottom, which was only 12 feet below the waterline. I therefore made the reform and gave up the attack. Then commenced the weird experience of steaming away under fire and not being able to return a shot, as monitors had no after guns. The shore firing suddenly stopped at about 22,000 yards. Now, the extraordinary thing was that subsequent experience showed us that this battery, the Tirpitz battery, could range up to 32,000 yards, and yet it let us steam steadily away without firing another shot, when for nearly another hour they could have kept us under a steady fire. We could only steam at about 7 knots, and had 10,000 yards to go before we were outside their range. It was not until afterward that we found out that a premature burst of one of the German shells near the muzzle of a gun and caused the officer in command to fear that the full charges gave too great a chamber pressure for the shell to stand. He therefore left off using full charges and fired only 3/4 charges. Thus we got off without being sunk, a very lucky escape. In September 1915, Sir John French, the Commander-in-Chief of the British Expeditionary Force, was about to launch an attack on further south, and asked for our cooperation by trying to hold the enemy on the coast by threat of invasion, so as to reduce to minimum the number of troops that the Germans could send as reinforcements, to the point he was about to attack. Now, there is no operation more difficult to carry out successfully than to feign a landing that is not going to take place. The reason for this is simple, namely, that a real landing should be a swift, sure, secret stroke. The whole art in its preparation is to avoid the slightest indication that anything is about to take place. Where was this man at the Dardanelles? Seriously. Guy who should have been in charge of the Dardanelles. The only thing that appeared to be, to me, as reasonable was to bombard Zeebrugge and also the Middelkerke West End sector simultaneously, and to keep up the bombardment for several days in succession, while at the same time spreading rumours that a landing was in course of preparation, in the hope that these would leak through to the enemy's lines. Since it was desired to give the impression that the firing was a precursor to a landing, the shore batteries and observation posts were chosen for attack, and not such objectives as the lock gates of Zeebrugge and the dockyard at Ostend. On subsequent occasion, a more ambitious programme was carried out. See page 104, which is just over this page. On the evening of September 24th, the force available was split up into 2 squadrons. The Prince Eugene and General Crawford, with 5 destroyers, 2 paddle minesweepers, 1 division of net drifters, and the yacht Sander, all under command of Captain E. Wigham of the Prince Eugene, left to bombard the forts of Zeebrugge, which from our previous bombardment we knew all about. And on the morning of the September 25th, I took the remainder of the 12-inch monitors and the Marshal Ney, a 15-inch monitor, to West Deep and opened fire on the shore defences at Middlework and West End, about which we had no previous experience. Against these, we fired 102 rounds of 12-inch and 17 rounds of 15-inch shell. The Zeebrugge squadron commenced operations at 7 a.m, and at 9 a.m, the batteries replied with heavy guns. At 9:15, the yacht Sander, which was rather close into the shore, was struck, probably by an 8-inch shell, and sunk. All our executive officers were killed, including Lieutenant Commander Gartsard Tipping, the oldest naval officer serving at sea. This cannon officer returned to the Navy on the outbreak of war at an age when most men are beyond active service, being over 70 years of age, and undertook the duties of captain of a yacht in a Dover command in spite of the arduous work and exposure which the performance of his duties entailed. The drifter Fearless was active in saving the survivors. At 10:20, the nets were boarded, and whilst this was in progress, the drifter Hyacinth Skipper Lawrence Charlotte was heavily shelled. The crew, however, stuck to their work and saved the nets, for which steadiness under fire the skipper received a Distinguished Service Cross, and the mate, J. Pryor, the Distinguished Service Medal. Other bombardments took place on September 26th and 27th, during November, and on December 2nd and 27th. What proved for us that very instructive firing was carried out on January 26th with 5 monitors, each firing 1 round at 100-second intervals, that is, 1 round from the 5 monitors every 20 seconds, against a group of strong positions near West End. Rear Admiral de Martelive, commanding the French naval force, flew his flag in the Lord Clive, presumably the only occasion on which a French admiral has flown his flag on an English man of war in action. Aeroplane spotting was used, and also spotting from the fixed observation stations in Newport lines. These results were carefully analysed and proved very instructive, as considerable discrepancies were found to exist between the two methods of observation. Owing to the comparative nearness of the fixed stations to the fallen shot, their wide distance apart, and the experience of the observers, there was little doubt that the aeroplane spotting was at fault. To test this, I chose 3 places, all well known to the air observers, and plans of each to 3 different scales were made to correspond approximately to their visual appearance at different heights of observation. The observers were then in turn examined by being told to record their estimates of the distance from a selected point of certain pencil marks. The result amply confirmed their inability to judge distances with any degree of accuracy. This led to a complete revision of our aeroplane spotting methods. Starting from the fact that our targets were few, there was no great difficulty in observers learning their targets absolutely by heart. On the following principle: suppose that a gun is being fired from a distance at Trafalgar Square, and assume that Nelson's Monument is the centre of the target. Call this the point of reference. Suppose an imaginary line to pass from the gun through the monument. Call this the line of reference. Then the observer had to learn by heart, in actual yards, what was the distance to the right or left of the line of reference, and the distance short or over from the point of reference, of all the salient fixtures such as the Admiralty Arch, St. Martin's Church, Centre of the National Gallery Act. By so doing, no estimation was required. The distances were definitely learned, so that shell pitching on or near these points should be signalled at once with absolute accuracy. At the same time, a method by which the observer in the aeroplane was relieved from all the time taking was suggested by the officers of the Riviera. Moreover, when firing a complete record was kept of the alterations in adjustments for range and direction of each shot fired, these, together with the spotting records and signals by aeroplanes, were sent to my office, where they were analysed and results sent to the ships concerned. This universal practice was of great value, as it called the attention of the director officers to the evil of guessing corrections instead of applying them by definite rule. It also exposed errors in laying. The general rule we laid down was to allow the full correction, as reported by observer, if the spot was more than 300 yards in range, or 50 yards in direction, and half of the correction if inside these distances. I never omitted to analysing all shootings personally, when possible. The labour involved in these analyses and investigations were considerable, but it was the cause of the extremely good results which were ultimately obtained. They were doing a lot. Right. This is HMS Prince Rupert. Again, it's the best picture I can find of her. She'd spent her year with years of World War One with the Dover Squadron. She did what the Dover Squadron did, and she didn't really manage to get up anything sort of separate towards the end. But this picture is kind of interesting because I'm not quite sure when it is, but I think it's possibly when she was under conversion to having an 18-inch gun, because there were a few of them which were looked at for it. And towards the end of the war, they were looking at possibly all of them getting 18-inch guns, as well as their 12-inch ones. Now we have Sir John Moore, and I couldn't find a decent picture of Sir John Moore, but I could find this very, very cool model from Bob Plord. So I hope he doesn't mind me using it, because it's a really, really cool model to illustrate them. Sir John Moore is built at Scott Shipbuilding and Engineering Company shipyard in Greenock. It's commissioned in July 1915, and she briefly serves as a tender for the gunnery school after World War One, and placed in reserve in early 1920, and only listed for sale in 1921 when she's towed to Bremen in Germany for demolition. So she's actually has her work done in Germany when she's scrapped, which is rather rude, I think. Also, apparently she weighed slightly less than the others. There's no real reason why. Slight differences in manufacture, but it's a couple of hundred tons is an estimate, and I personally doubt it. Her guns came from HMS Hannibal, which is always nice to know. So she is, and of course, she is named for Sir John Moore. Now, John Moore is a slightly more interesting general than some of the others. He's known as Moore of Corona, and for he's best known for military training reforms and for his death at the Battle of Corona, in which he repulsed the French army under Marshal Soult during the Peninsular War. He's a pretty interesting general, but if you've noticed the theme here, yes, I do think the British Royal Navy was actually trolling the British Army when they picked out these names, because they do all seem to be generals who died. And of course, most famously, there is General Wolfe himself. And as you can see, this vessel was actually fitted with an 18-inch gun, so maybe the Royal Navy liked General Wolfe more than they liked the others. Wolfe was launched at Hebburn in September 1915, commissioned in November 1915 under Commander Nelson William Diggy. She's the last of the class to complete, and actually doesn't really get to see action until the 25th of January 1916, when Marshal Foch requested a demonstration of monitors. She was commanded at sea by Captain John Alfred Moreton, and was used as the flagship for this operation by Bacon. On 24th of April 1916, Wolfe and her sister, Prince Eugene, were detailed to cover the laying of a net barrage 12 miles off the Belgian coast, stretching 20 miles from Newport to Zeebrugge. Wolfe was spotted by the Tirpitz battery, that's 4 11-inch guns, and straddled at a range of 32,000 yards. She steamed out of range, only to be ineffectively attacked by German aircraft, which Wolfe responded to with shrapnel shell. She then provided cover for British destroyers when the Germans attempted to press home a torpedo boat attack. Afterwards, up until September, when a weather turned wintry, Wolfe and the other 12-inch monitors patrolled the Belgian coast along with other monitors, destroyers, and drifters to prevent Germans breaking out or laying more mines. In fact, minesweeping is a continual thing they need to be covered for. Wolfe is also one of the ships that's taken under training for Operation Hush, as I've been talking about earlier, the planned landing of the Belgian coast by the 1st Division. And I just think that's an awful idea, but we'll leave that to one side. And in New Year 1918, so throughout January, February 1918, Wolfe was selected to be converted to take an 18-inch gun. Now, the 18-inch guns are produced by the Elswick Ordnance Company, but due to labour troubles, although they're ordered in October 1917, it's not completed until May 1918, and finally arrives on ports of installation in Wolfe on June 1918. So the total weight of 384 tons is added onto her back. It's for the 18-inch guns and mounting a quarterdeck. And that's not including the weight of the 60 shells and 72 full charges of cordite she carried for her. The guns were fixed to starboard and had originally been intended for a turret of HMS Furious. They actually do get to use these, and they managed to blast away at various positions with their 18-inch guns before the end of the war. And in fact, she gets a bit of a record. Because on the 28th of September, Wolf was in Division 3 with a newly completed coastal defence ship HMS Gorgon, and anchored parallel to the coastline of Zeebrugge Ostend area. SM-32 opened fire on the railway bridge at Snakkerst, 4 miles south of Ostend, at a range of 36,000 yards. That's 32,918 meters away, nearly 33 kilometers. She therefore managed to fire the heaviest shell from the largest gun at the longest range at that time that the Royal Navy has ever fired in action, apparently. During the rest of the day, Wolf fired 52 18-inch shells out of supply at 60 at Stanxley, all landing close to the target. And, in the nicest way, would you like to be the person trying to negotiate a railway bridge with 18-inch shells landing close by? No, you wouldn't. None of us would. Now, here is the interesting thing. 18-inch gun added on, possibly looking like Elephant and Castle. Or not. They were effective ships for what they're required to do. And what they're required to do was be the fire support for the Western Front. They did that well. Really well. But it didn't have many big battles or many flashing occasions. And honestly, Bacon is a good historian. He's a fairly decent admiral and certainly seems to understand amphibious warfare fairly well. Should probably been in command of Dardanelles by judging by that paragraph compared to who was actually sent out there and what they actually managed to achieve. But he's not good at fighting a press war. Tritt and Keyes have him beat on that front. Certainly Beatty does. Beatty has them all beat when it comes to fighting a press war. And that's part of the problem, because you have the glamour of the battlecruiser force, you have the high stakes, risky night fighting, coolness of the Harwich force. You have the mighty power and presence of the Grand Fleet, all in close proximity. And then you have the Dover Patrol. The Tsar is named Patrol, not Army Support Force, not the Dover Force, it's just named Patrol. And there are monitors. And look at it. Now, I might think it has the potential for being a sports car version of a ship if you just give it more power. But most people wouldn't agree with me. And I realise I'm a bit weird. So what do we have coming up? We have Naval History Live coming up. Let's see. We have the 4th of March, which is Thursday this week. Crown Colony class cruisers. Well, hey, and alive. 5th of March, it's World War II TV, Operation Claymore. That's going to be fun. 7th of March, Brew Ships 40, books used when writing. That's going to be fun. 11th of March, Lend-Lease Act, 80 years to the day. 14th of March, Brew Ships 41, A History of Armour and Amphibious Warfare. 18th of March, Patron 19, Second Year Powers. Dreadnought Procurement and Construction. Spain, Austria-Hungary, South America, Greece and Ottomans. Suggested by Bernora. 21st of March, Brew Ships 42, some more sci-fi. 25th of March, Patron 20, Sino-Japanese War of 1894, Naval and Land Operations. Fighting Modern with Feudal Societies. And 26th of March, Armchair Admirals, Battle of Matapan. 2nd of April, Mantour Tiger class cruisers in Alive. And then 4th of April, Brew Ships 43. Now, I'm going to apologise because this is going to be a longer running thing than I ever thought it was, the Monitors of the Royal Navy. And the reason it's a longer running one is because, honestly, I'm having to spend a lot more time making my own sources in many ways. And when I say making my own sources, I mean the information is so widely spread to produce slides that I'm happy with, and I don't then, reading my notes, realize I've missed a bit. It's proving quite an interesting challenge. And I have a feeling this is going to go on and on because, A, the monitors get up to a lot and they're completely forgotten. And the more you read this book, the more you realize there is so much in there to be covered. And there's also something else you might notice. You are still on the workbench because I haven't yet figured out how to get my desk out of my bedroom, because it turns out they didn't just use screws when putting this together in my bedroom. Someone decided that they needed to glue stuff as well. So I'm having to figure out a way to get the glue off, which kind of sucked up quite a lot of time yesterday. But that's for another time. I hope you've enjoyed this live. I hope you're enjoying the monitors. I hope you're enjoying and not upset that it's going to take longer and longer to get through than I thought. But I'm going to try and make sure I keep to at least 3, if not 4 videos a month on this topic. And I'm going to get up the Royal Navy N80s video again. Well, it's finished now. I've managed to get it so that the colours work, so I'll get it done soon. Anyway, thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed. If you'd like, please do like. If you really like to see more, subscribe, please. Maybe press the little bell down there as well. That gives you an alert when more videos come up. And if you feel like it, come drop in on Discord, say hi to everyone, have a chat. It's always good discussions going on there. And if you're feeling very generous and you want to support my very expensive book habit, of which a new one has arrived today, which I'm going to be reviewing on Sunday, because someone asked me to look at, because I was kept talking about it, the Italian front, and see if I could find a good book on the Italian front in World War I. Caporetto and the Isonzo campaign, the Italian front, 1915-18, by John MacDonald and Zelcho Simpric. It's very good, but I'll be getting into that on Sunday in Blue Ships. Thank you very much. I hope you've enjoyed, and take care.